with a group, and while we were waiting for the band to take the stage, one of the group asked me, "Hey, do you work in AI? I heard you work in AI and sustainability." And I say, yeah, I'm a sustainable computing consultant. And blank look on his face. So when I got done explaining what that is, I help companies to measure their digital emissions. He said, "Oh, this is great because I've read that these AI data centers are a big environmental problem. And so tell me, how can I use AI better?" So I say, well, the very best thing, the most high impact thing that you can do is when you go into work on Monday, talk to the IT team and ask them if one of their selection criteria for their cloud apps and their AI apps and vendors is sustainability and carbon reporting. And ask them if your company is measuring the carbon emissions of your online computing, your cloud computing. His face went blank again. So I pivoted to the sustainable AI equivalent of switching out the incandescent bulb for an LED bulb in the table lamp. And yeah, he was happy. But it left me thinking, what a big difference it would make for our industry and everybody here at Green IO who cares about green software and sustainability and AI if the articles about the AI data centers would tell the readers that when they're online at work using Zoom and Canva and Microsoft 365, that when they use those cloud apps and when they use the AI features, that they are part of the demand that's making the new data centers necessary. I mean, I understand that the tech industry is obviously pushing this, and everybody who has a company that's adding AI features to their cloud apps is driving this. But customer purchasing power is a strong economic force. And it makes you wonder what would happen if the public made the connection between going to work and working in these apps and the harms that come from uh, the data centers and the infrastructure that supports them. So here at Green IO today, this morning, we heard from Masheka Allgood and Xiaolei Ren about how there are many environmental harms from data centers, about how they're running diesel generators that emit pollution into the air that are really degrading air quality near where data centers are, and that data centers are everywhere, particularly near big cities, particularly near prosperous big cities, and that the air quality is going down, and that the power supply is being affected, and also that the drinking water is being absorbed to a huge degree without any real disclosure as to what's happening. So there are all these community harms and health harms. And there's a lot more from Xiaolei Ren and Masheka Allgood about those things. But I'm not going to talk about those. I'm going to talk about seatbelts. In the 1950s and 60s, when the automobile industry was taking over the US, people were aware that there were crashes and deaths. And the auto industry said, this is the trade off you make when you have the convenience of an automobile and you're driving at these fast speeds, there are going to be crashes. And that's the way it has to be. But then Ralph Nader wrote a book, Unsafe at Any Speed, that detailed, among other things, how the automobile industry was unwilling to spend a small amount of money on a simple safety solution, which is seatbelts. It was a New York Times bestseller, stayed on the New York Times bestseller for months, and there was a public outcry. There were Senate hearings, and there was a demand that the auto industry do better and that car safety be an important thing. And now 49 states have seatbelt laws. It was an inflection point. The tech industry today resembles the auto industry back then. The tech industry today is saying the damage of AI data centers, the health impacts from air pollution, the power consumption, the water consumption, this is how it has to be. Just like the auto industry was saying that the crashes, the injuries, the deaths, that's how it had to be. But we in the green software industry here at this conference, we know that there are better options available and we're making them possible. So we're kind of like Ralph Nader in this analogy. We want to get the word out and grow our business. And we want the public and the companies where the public works that are buying AI apps and cloud apps to demand that the tech industry do better, just like the auto industry had to do better. And there are two things that we should be doing, possibly a third that we'll discuss. So first, with our work, we need to make the fact that there are sustainable approaches to AI and green AI options and cloud apps available. We need to make that common knowledge, just like the necessity of seatbelts became common knowledge. And you, all the people in this room here at Green IO, you keep doing what you're doing and creating more green AI options for companies to buy. And the more that there are, the more they're in the air supply, the more it will become common knowledge. You could also assist your clients in marketing loudly about how their sustainability is a competitive advantage, how they are better than the alternative because of the fact that they can measure their emissions and control them. But I'll say more on that later. Second, we also want more companies and the public who work there to demand green AI seatbelts, and sustainable cloud apps. We want these drivers to demand seatbelts, which requires that it be common knowledge that we are in fact driving cars without seatbelts when we use mainstream AI and cloud apps that are doing harm. We need people to draw the connection between going online and using mainstream apps that are not efficient, not power efficient, and not designed for minimal impact. That when we go online and use them, we can draw the line between that and the fact that the data center down the street, because there are data centers near where all of us live, that the data center down the street is emitting more air pollution, and that the power plants that supply it, the power plants in our county, are using more fossil fuel and more water and emitting more carbon dioxide. We need people drawing that line between their selection of a vendor at the place where they work, a mainstream vendor, and the big bad data centers they read about in the newspaper, like the guy who was at the concert with me. And we want companies to start thinking about making a switch. Drawing that line between online usage and the impacts of that usage, it relates to what I do. In my case, it's via the emissions reporting. So I work with the sustainability teams at carbon conscious companies. And these are companies that are measuring their emissions and publishing their emissions and what they're doing in order to reduce them. And they are realizing that AI is causing more emissions that they have no handle on, and that the tools that they're using don't have any way of measuring that amplification that AI is bringing to the problem. And these are end user companies, not tech companies. They're companies that are using, say, Google or Notion or Squarespace for their website that all have AI features in them that are amplifying the environmental impact of their usage and causing new AI data centers to need to be built. And I go in and I help them dig into their carbon emissions and find the digital emissions that the tools they're using might not find. So, for instance, the emissions from their devices, the emissions from transmitting data over networks, the emissions from hosting their website, and also the people who visit their website, which is part of their Scope 3 emissions. And then, of course, their use of the cloud. And they usually bring me in to help them with their use of the cloud. But as we go through these other three pieces, the devices, the data network, the website, they begin to see that when they talk to their website hosting company like Squarespace or Wix, that there's no information from that company on any of the carbon emissions that they are causing by using that company for hosting their website. And then we get into the cloud apps, and there's no information from Microsoft 365 or Gmail or Notion on their usage for a year, even though they pay them as vendors, there's no information coming on their carbon emissions, and makes it very difficult to report. And these sustainability teams say to me, like, wait, what? How can this be that there's a big data void, that there's so much behind this, so much detail in measuring all these digital emissions, and no transparency from the companies that are causing the data centers to have all this impact? They won't tell us how much that we're causing, and we can't report it in our carbon emissions reports. So it's impossible for these sustainability teams, and these are the people who care about carbon emissions, to be able to see any kind of linkage between their company's online app use and the selection of their different vendors and the impact of the data centers and causing new data centers to come online, unless somebody like me comes in and does a project like this. And it would make a big difference if they had better visibility. And I do help them. I dig in and I figure out, like, if they're using Zoom near their office, which co-locator might be hosting their Zoom calls, and how much storage they have, how many hours, and what the carbon intensity of the grid for their location of that co-locator is. And we calculate their cloud emissions, but it isn't perfect. And they say, wait, what? How can this be so hard? How is it that we're driving a car without being able to see through the windshield? And that's when I talk to them about making a switch to greener choices, that they're using Notion, which doesn't have a sustainability page on its website, but they could be using Atlassian, which was an early signer to the SBTI and is pretty thorough in describing its sustainability programs. Then we get to the second thing we should be doing, which is making it more obvious that the consultants who are in this room, who are working with tech companies and application companies in the cloud to make them more sustainable, are providing an option that the companies I work with, the carbon conscious companies, can work with. So you guys here are equipping clients with carbon measurement and carbon reduction for all of the cloud computing that they do, and for the apps that provide your customers, like the carbon conscious companies I work with. But I wonder if before you leave them, you might also provide them with a little bit of a capability to do it more themselves. And that gets to the other thing that I do. I co-founded Cloud Sustainability Watch, which is just a nonprofit website which functions like the big sign in the airport that points you to your gate according to your flight. And it works for technologists, pointing them to their green software tools and classes and information, and consultants like the people here, and green web design consultants. And there's some information I added there, and some downloads and information on how to do a project. And it allows even a solo technologist who has an interest in green software to be able to launch a little viral green activity of their own, measuring the emissions of a certain project, or putting in some power measurement and reduction in the server of the instance or the app that they're running their work on. And those viral moments also contribute to making green software and green AI common knowledge, so that when people are trying to find it, it's a little bit more available, a little bit there, and it can prompt the switch to our green AI seatbelts. So now a question. What if the articles that are about the AI data centers that cause a lot of harm followed on and told the readers about companies switching from mainstream apps and mainstream AI that is very harm inducing to more sustainably designed applications that can replace, and making that switch? And what if it really told the reader about how at their company they could be making that switch? Like the guy at the band concert that I talked about at the start. What if the article he'd read had made that connection for him? He would have understood what I was telling him a little better. We here in the industry, we could come together as a small coalition for 6 or 9 months and hire a marketing strategy consultant to do a little bit of seeding of these stories, to contact the journalists at the Financial Times or the Wall Street Journal, to plant these stories, the trend story for the follow-on. Hey, you've been covering AI data centers, but did you see this trend of companies that are more carbon conscious and are making a switch from unacceptable mainstream AI to more green AI options? And here are the consultants that helped it happen. And when we're doing this project and when we're working with this consultant, we could also build a little kit, a marketing kit for the clients that we are doing sustainable computing projects with. And when we add measurement to their cloud installations, we might be able to also equip them to do some competitive marketing with solid messaging around why their investment in sustainability makes them a better choice than their competitors. So this is just 50% of an idea. And people come and find me at the break during the conference and we can talk about it. But it could be that there's something here that we could do to make this more of an inflection point. And the QR code for Cloud Sustainability Watches is right on this slide if you would like to have a look at the site. So to summarize, more of us doing what I do, please come and join me in this work, working with non-tech companies to get them to that, wait, what? And see that there is a giant void of data from their cloud partners and their AI apps that they are paying money to about what their emissions are, and get them to think about making the switch to better vendors. And then increasing the visibility for the clients of everybody here in this room at Green.io who are delivering better green AI options and more sustainable cloud overall, and publicizing their green credentials so that the options to switch to become more visible every time somebody sees it. And last, so let's consider as a group maybe stoking an outcry, creating our own inflection point by building a temporary coalition that supports our customers' marketing of themselves for their sustainability and indirectly marketing ourselves, but also talking to journalists about that next trend story about customers making the switch to green AI, which is to say, to summarize, we get people understanding that they are, in essence, driving a car without a seatbelt when they're using mainstream AI, hurting their health and community, and making the switch to those green AI options. And that customer purchasing power that I talked about at the beginning, that is such a force in economics, begins to bring pressure to the tech industry to do better, like the auto industry had to do better. And maybe we as a group, doing a little more than just our tech work, maybe stoking the flames of public attention to create an inflection point and do a little bit of our strategic marketing as a group for a brief time about making this switch and help people to demand that they get their green AI seatbelts. So again, my name is Susannah Hill. I co-founded Cloud Sustainability Watch, and thank you for listening.